Moody with Lapiana Consulting, and I am excited for this next installment of Voices from the Sector, where I am speaking with Cheryl Contee. Cheryl is the award-winning founder and chair of Do Big Things and Chief Innovation Officer at the Impact Seat. She's also the author of Mechanical Bull, an Amazon bestseller, Mechanical Bull, How You Can Achieve Startup Success, and she's been featured on How I Built This with Guy Raz, along with plenty of other media outlets. She is a force and a unicorn. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation with her. Cheryl, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Makia.
I have so many questions for you, and I'm just going to jump right into it because in reading your accomplishments and where you are sprinkling your glitter all over the social sector and the world, it's apparent that you stay making boss moves. And so can you tell us a little bit about Do Big Things and the problems you're trying to solve there, as well as the work that you do at Impact Seat?
Absolutely, and thanks for the opportunity. So Do Big Things is a digital agency that works with the world's leading causes, campaigns, and corporations with mission-driven initiatives to provide the new narrative and new tech for the new era in which we're all living today. So that's everything from digital strategy, campaign and content development. We build things, apps, websites, etc., all the way to digital ads and engaging people, with nutritious content in that aspect. We work with the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. We work with Mertz Gilmore, Solidago Foundation, really proud of that work and digital capacity building. We work with amazing organizations like Paid Leave US. We've worked with Moms Rising, Color of Change. You name the group, you name the cause, and we've been there. And that work is really meaningful. We do that work so that we can reach people as rapidly as possible in real time at scale to, create change, not only here in the United States, but around the world. Then there's the Impact Seat. The Impact Seat focuses on women-led companies. And our founder, Barbara Clark, is actually one of the most prolific investors in the United States in women-led, especially women of color-led tech startups. And that's really exciting to be a part of. And I see these two organizations to a certain extent as two sides of one coin. There's the progressive political sphere, which is really important. Are we living our values? And on the progressive financial sphere, does, how we invest, who gets funded, does that match the values of the future? Women control over 85% of consumer spending, and yet only 3% of venture capital goes to women-led companies. That is just some 19th century old-timey bullcrap, okay? Like we need a different future, right? And so, we're all about at the Impact Seat, making sure that people who have incredible ideas, that are solving problems, who just happen to be women, get the funding they need to change the world. And, how do we democratize access to capital? How do we make sure on the other side at Do Big Things that democracy works for the people?
Wow. I have this visual of the kind of the through line of equity, whether it's about economic equity or kind of like the power in like using your voice, the agency that communities should have for self-determination. I just feel like what you lifted up between Do Big Things and the Impact Seat are kind of like fertile soil for actually creating a society that works for all and not just some.
That's the goal.
Not just the billionaires that have really done well in a pandemic that's globally impacting and devastating, but for everyone. And so it's exciting to hear, I think, how you articulate what both of those organizations do and how you're using your superpowers in both of those organizations. You mentioned some of the organizations you've worked with, Color of Change and a number of others. And I know that Movement for Black Lives and Community Change and Supermajority have also been part of your sphere of influence, I guess, with the work that you're doing. Can you talk a little bit about how technology plays a role in the impact that those like change making organizations are able to have?
Oh, absolutely. Without technology, again, how do you reach people rapidly, real time, in a powerful way at scale? And that's what these organizations are doing. And they are interrupting your regularly scheduled program, to get help on, saving democracy, making sure there's economic recovery, addressing climate change, addressing, criminal justice reform and police brutality. You know, they are finding people and bringing them together into a united movement in which we walk forward together. So it's really exciting to work with these cutting edge groups that are creating the future that we're all going to live in.
Hmm. I can definitely co-sign on that, having worked with organizations where it's like it can be the reason I get up in the morning because their project for strategy development or thinking about how they're going to cut child poverty in half is like, yeah, that's something I want my fingerprints on. Um, so you noted, like you used the phrase, I think, saving democracy in part of what you just said. And I'm reflecting on, a recent speech by President Biden about like the pandemic and his response, et cetera. And then also juxtaposing that with all of the other, I guess, ails that we are trying to respond to in order to actually have a democracy. So what's coming to mind for me right now is overt voter suppression and misinformation and disinformation campaigns and how those are a risk and a detriment to our democracy. And so I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit about how you mentioned kind of like meeting people at scale and the power of technology in that? But can you maybe go down one more level related to the role of technology in combating like the attacks we've seen on democracy within the last year?
Absolutely. Well, tech, it's a double-edged sword, right? It is, there's so much information. I would have loved to have had all of this information when I was a kid. I'm jealous of my 4-year-old in a way because there's nothing he can't know. He'll ask me a question like, why is the sky blue? Or, why do snakes move the way they do? And I can just pull up a video and tell him. We can just watch and know, like, how does a toilet work? Let's find out. Internet, show us. It's a good question. I don't know. I kind of know. I don't know. So, technology is amazing in that way. And yet, there's a reason why there's a certain group of people, who are older, and, less able to, filter out credible or versus non-credible sources, have been more vulnerable to Nigerian prince, solicitations and to conspiracy theories. Older people, the internet is a wild, wild west for them, and they're not necessarily, and it's not only older people, of course, but, they're certainly some people are more vulnerable to this misinformation and disinformation than others. And, the internet has certainly facilitated that, and I think that social platforms can do more to take responsibility for the impact, that they have and are, that, there are people pushing, social networks to really understand, hey, the way you have structured this algorithm, is either part of the problem or part of the solution. And, certainly we've been part of that effort behind the scenes, working with major platforms. But, in terms of democracy as a whole, I see these efforts in the states, state legislatures to try to, shorten, windows of early voting, to try to put restrictions on mail-in ballots, et cetera, et cetera. It's rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. They wouldn't, to me, it smacks of absolute desperation, understanding that their policies are grotesquely unpopular and even harmful to the people they purport to be representing. And thus, if those people actually exercise power, those policies that really benefit only a very few and help to prop up the status quo will collapse. And look, we have prevailed before. They tried to stop us from voting with the Jim Crow laws, and that was temporary. Okay, that was temporary, and this is temporary too. Like, the more they try to stop us, the harder we will come. Okay. And that's one of the things I love about Black culture, and, one of the things that I love about, the culture in which I was born. Not to diss other cultures, I'm a multicultural person myself, but, coming from Black culture, we are undefeatable. Like, you cannot defeat us. Like, if you steal from us, we dance. You beat us, we sing. Like, you cannot crush this. And, you know, that's how I see this voting thing. Like, trying to take away our voice and our vote, we will only come harder and louder.
Mm. There's an urgency, even though we've seen this before. And I appreciate we've been in this place before and it's temporary. It also feels, perhaps, with the significance of the pandemic and the destruction that we haven't even seen really the full brunt of yet, in my estimation, that there's this kind of urgency in this moment. And I'm wondering, how do big things and impact seat are meeting the urgency of this moment? And if anything has changed since the pandemic started?
Oh, sure. Well, in terms of, how we reacted to the pandemic, I was always keen, with my team to build a 21st century company. And the way that folks work now, from their homes, or, from whatever location they can find, outside, what have you, using Zoom, using collaborative document creation, those are things we had been using for 10 or 15 years. And many people remember that the first time they were exposed to Zoom was trying to get on a call with us, and later, they use it all day. And so, to a certain extent, our team, the way that we work, didn't change at all. We had some co-working spaces that we closed that people could go in once or twice a week if they wanted to do that. But for the most part, our work continued exactly the way it did before. Everyone had to catch up to us. And we actually spent quite a lot of the early pandemic, training literally hundreds of grassroots groups around the country, on digital capacity building in order to prepare for the 2020 census and 2020 election. I don't know if you heard, Makia, but like, there were things happening. Things were popping in 2020. It was a busy year. Uh, so so that we really tried to respond to to help others, with what we had already learned about how you can, really be very efficient, in a way, in using, all of these modern techniques, to collaborate across time and space from, whatever location you're in. In terms of, the work that we're doing now, yes, of course, democracy, is at the forefront for many of the groups for whom, we work with. Uh, Certainly, climate change, and environmental justice. The League of Conservation Voters, is, a client. Gun safety continues to be a concern. For us, Every Town for Gun Safety, we're really proud to have been working with them for many years. If there's one benefit of this pandemic, it's that we haven't had a school shooting in a while. I don't know that this is the way that we wanted to achieve that,
Mm.
but that's only, if there's one very, very slim silver lining, it's that, we haven't, had to suffer through, one of those, for some time. And, of course, you have, economic, recovery and empowerment. I think a number of our groups now, in this new, era that we've stepped in, are, very, very keen to ensure that women in particular and people of color, aren't left behind in this economic recovery, and that equity means that, everyone, has a fair shot, everyone has what they need, to be successful as we move forward into the 21st century.
Mm. No, it wasn't lost on me that things were popping in 2020. I am very grateful to still be here through all of that popping. Um, yeah, it's definitely been a lot. So, question for you, as I think about, all of the different milestones along your career, and as I was preparing for this conversation, I was like, wow, Cheryl has receipts. So I mentioned Do Big Things and Impact Seat, but prior to that, you co-founded and were the CEO of Fission Strategy, And you also co-founded the social marketing software Attentively at Blackbaud, which was the first tech startup with a Black female founder on board history that was acquired by a NASDAQ traded company. So I'm going to exhale now because I feel like that was just that was a feat, and it raises so many questions for me. But one of them is thinking about. So I want you to tell listeners maybe about that experience. And that's a really broad question, but I'm just thinking that you started a company, you had a vision, it was then acquired by Blackbaud, which is, in my mind, like a Rolls Royce of something. And so going through that process, I'm curious about perhaps your experiences as a Black woman, and then what advice you would have for other Black women who might aspire to be entrepreneurs or want to navigate in some of those spaces.
Absolutely. Well, I remember the first time that someone, an investor said, Cheryl, you're a serial entrepreneur. And I just hadn't seen myself that way. I was just, to me, all of these, businesses and organizations, even that I've, helped to create, you know, they're all doing the same thing, but just in a different flavor, in a different vehicle. We're all driving towards the same, destination, which is freedom, right? All of this is about how do we get free, and how can we, are there tools that we can use where we can bring people together to get free, all of us. So it's kind of just happened, right? That I've been an impact entrepreneur, as it's called. An entrepreneur who is mission driven. Who sees that the bottom line also has to protect people's bottoms, if you're if you catch my drift. And look, I think that it's really important for Black and brown people to consider entrepreneurship. I think in a lot of minority communities and immigrant communities, folks are, if someone is talented, they're encouraged to be a doctor or a lawyer. And maybe if someone really knows what that is, an engineer, because those are safe jobs, they're prestigious jobs. You can make a good living, and you're contributing positively in some way. And entrepreneurship is something that feels like it's risky, right? And what I'm here to tell you is you know, big risk, big reward. But also, entrepreneurship now, it's easier than ever. The startup costs are lower than they've ever been. And, when you see a gap, when you see a problem, you can be a part of actually creating that solution, of creating something new. I can't even tell you what it feels like to build something that has never existed before, right? It's a magical feeling. It's so empowering. And when you can then invite others into that and inspire them with, what can we achieve together? There's no feeling like it in the world, especially if it's something that actually can benefit people, and improve other people's lives. So, I would encourage people to, consider it. You can fail up, 90% of American small businesses fail in their first year. So there's a really good chance that, for a lot of different reasons that have nothing to do with how talented you are, your business might fail. When you then leave and start interviewing for jobs, your employer isn't going to see someone who failed. They see someone who dared to dream, who is ambitious, who is driven, who worked really hard, who had to make decisions really, really quickly, who had to wear a lot of different hats. They see someone who is prepared to contribute at a higher executive level. So, that's just to say, that, certainly is it challenging being a, what they call in the startup world a non-traditional founder? Absolutely. The saying comes to mind, what Ginger Rogers said about Dancing with Fred Astaire, which is, I do the same thing that he does, but backwards and in heels, and like, as a,
Mm.
as a Black or brown founder, it's like, backwards in heels and with, a ball and chain around your foot. I mean, you're really, you're really challenged. But, if you believe in yourself, you will find others who believe in you. You might have to knock on more doors, you might have to make it work with a little bit less capital, but you can do it. And I am proof. I am living proof of that. I actually wrote a book about it. It's available on
Yeah,
Amazon. I don't know if you
yeah.
knew that, Makia. Did you know that this book, Mechanical
It was
Bull,
on,
How You Can
it was on
Achieve?
Bestseller.
startup success. I think it was an Amazon bestseller. At any rate, I wrote this book because it's the book that I wish that I'd had when I was starting out, and it's very how to. It's pretty practical, but it's also funny. I really tried hard to make it entertaining and approachable, and warm. It describes the life cycle. A lot of people think, oh, I'm going to start this business, I'm going to have it for the rest of my life. Nah. Startup is 5 to 10 years max, if you're lucky. And then maybe you're in that slim 0.5% that goes on to IPO. That's probably not you, right? So, how do you navigate, every stage, of the life cycle of a startup? And, for those of us who are not, you know, white and or male, what are the speed bumps that you in particular might experience at that stage, and how do you overcome them? So, I'm really excited now, to be doing even more mentoring of startups, and, encouraging others to invest. I'm actually the first portfolio member of New Media Ventures. New Media Ventures focuses on helping to fund, the movement, the leading activists, leading impact entrepreneurs, who are looking to create again a new future. So it's been really great to step even further into that venture capital world, because that we need to make sure that progressive economic solutions are tied to progressive political solutions. That is how we actually really completely change this landscape. And when you think about the New Deal, the original New Deal, that's what that was. That was political and it was economic, and it transformed even the life that you and I lead today. You can go right back to that New Deal and see that, a through line to, how we're able to live our lives in a way that our grandparents could not.
You are speaking to my soul right now. As I think about an organization that has been, so the Children's Defense Fund has been thinking about its new strategic direction. And some of these themes have come up about like a New Deal era type of investment in children, that there isn't like a children's agenda for America. And what you just said is like so clear to me that I will be sharing that back with their president and CEO of like, this is the frame. Like it really clicks. And I think it makes so much sense um, as it relates to needing both of those components, like the economics and the political, and figuring out how to marry them together so that there actually is a country that works for all people. Um, but yeah, that was that was great.
Well, and absolutely. And look, I'm here in Silicon Valley, and, here in the Valley, Silicon Valley, Alley Beach, you've got people who still talk about, diversity, equity, and inclusion as this nice to have, right? It's a
Mhm.
moral imperative. Like if you're a good person, you care about that. And I say, bullocks to that. It's really about our economic future. All of the data shows that when teams are diverse, they are more innovative, they are more productive, they are more profitable. So, the argument I make is that, look, if all you care about is ROI, if all you care about is making money, the data is very clear. You have to have a diverse team. So if you're not doing that, it means you're not serious about that. You're addressing some other need. And especially now, no one's going to call you the N-word to your face, right? It's very rare. It's when logic leaves the room, right? That statistic that I told you, where you've got 85%, women buying 70 to 85% of everything, and yet very little investment in their ideas, right? In the solutions that they're coming up with. Like that just doesn't make any sense. That is illogical. It is irrational. When logic leaves the room, that racism and or sexism has entered. And that is a world that we should seek. We all benefit when that world is gone.
Hmm. Ooh, there's so many thoughts in my little mind, Cheryl, so many thoughts. Well, I know this won't be our last conversation because you've planted so many seeds, but I do have one final question for you, which I think is a nice bow for kind of the, what we've covered thus far. And that is, a few years ago, I interviewed Glenn Harris, who's the president and CEO of Race Forward. And one of the things he said at that time was that he was leaning into the question of whether or not America is possible, whether it's possible to have a functional, multiracial, and inclusive democracy. And that question really stuck with me. And we've talked about, how technology can perhaps help support, saving our democracy. And so I want to pose that question to you. Is America possible?
Oh, absolutely. When I see the world, we talked about, our grandparents, the world that my grandmother grew up in, I don't even know if she would recognize this current world. When I, there was a time when I was flying around the world for business. And, my mother would say, what, Cheryl, why do you call your grandmother before you call me? And I said, because she's never going to come, she's never going to stay in the Ritz-Carlton in Singapore, mommy. Like, that's just never going to happen to her. Like, I might as well be calling her from Mars. Like, this is exciting for her, in a way that, you know, I don't even know that you can understand, because you're a generation removed from even that reality. I mean, our grandparents grew up in a time when, like, there was a donkey based economy, when, like, literally donkeys would, like, bring, ice block. Let me tell you a quick story. My father used to call the refrigerator the icebox, and he was older as a dad. And, one day my brother and I were like, Daddy, why do you call it an icebox? And he paused because he knew he was about to drop some knowledge that we would remember the rest of our lives. And he said, kids, when I was your age, there was no refrigerator. It was ice in a box. And once a week, a donkey would come with a cart, and, like, we would get a new block of ice. Now, a lot of donkeys lost their jobs, obviously, like, as trucks became a thing. But, so, like, we no longer have a donkey based economy. Like, the we have experienced light years worth of change in just a few generations. I mean, I personally am only on my father's side, a few generations out of slavery. Like, we, is it possible? Absolutely. We can do this as Americans. Sir Winston Churchill had a famous saying that, the Americans, I'm paraphrasing, but basically he said something along the lines of, Americans will get it wrong every time until they get it right. And I believe him. I think he's absolutely right that we will get this right. It doesn't mean that we can let up on the pressure. It doesn't mean that we can't keep asking, but, we have to imagine in a big way and reimagine the civilization that we create out of these ashes. And let's be bold. Let's go Jedi. Let's focus on justice and ecocentrism and decolonization and innovation and bring that together. Why not? What have we got to lose? What do we have to lose? What do we have to gain?
Yeah. What's possible? No, I mean, there's so much there. I think I'm just overcome with gratitude, actually, because this conversation has been very illuminating, but then also, I think, very timely as I consider my own, I guess, like, agency and what it is I want to be doing in this moment, because it does feel like a different moment than 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Like, there's some reckoning happening. And so I think that some of the insights that you offered, as well as kind of the storyline of your book, which I'm very excited to read, because I think it's a gift when people have kind of gone through a process and then they share, like, a roadmap or a framework with others who may be on a similar journey or just want insights about, like, how to maneuver and how to navigate. And so, Cheryl, it has been a pleasure. I am excited to see your actions on LinkedIn and beyond, when you are celebrating all of the important work that you're doing on behalf of society, the organizations you work with, et cetera. And so thank you so much for taking time to chat with me.
Thank you, Makia. You continue to be an inspiration to me and so many others.